first ones through. There's a lot of apps already lined up. There's 1,000 apps waiting to be approved by Apple for a device that no one's even bought yet. So I can only imagine where that's going to go.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think the automobile industry is already using some technologies.
Oh yeah, so
IoT manufacturing, right?
Ford and Apple and IBM are already in there in the big time. The articles I've read are that Apple would like to become the interface for the cars, but I think IBM would like to do that as well. So it's going to be just like Unix was 25 years ago when I got started. Right. There's going to be all of these,
and then there's Google.
Correct.
Yeah, they want to be on the dashboard and everything.
Right. Well, so what happens now is the device, whatever it is, whether it's your phone, whether it's a car, whether it's your television, whatever a television is now, the device becomes completely independent from what's running on it. So you might end up having a dashboard that could be an Apple dashboard or a Microsoft dashboard, depending on whatever ecosystem you've bought into. Right. So that very well could happen. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the hardware manufacturers, the software manufacturers, and the service providers all decide to work with one another, because this is where it's all that glue on the back end that becomes the problem. That's the part where the real work happens. All the pretty eye candy on the front and the interface, and do you touch it or do you listen to it or does it watch you? That's all neat stuff, but the data part that I care about, that's all happening on the backside. That's about data transformation and about data collection, and that's where all kinds of bad things can happen if you do it wrong, So, yeah.
So you think that IoT has great promises?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Look, it's going to become a huge piece of the world economy. There's no if, and, or buts. You've got every big company sitting out there. You've got, in the phone space alone. I took a few notes here. Broadcom, Ericsson, Cisco, Intel, IBM. So all of it. Apple, General Electric, Ford. A lot of these are big old school at this point industrial companies, and they're all embracing this. So smart light bulbs. I mean, think about what GE makes. Every kind of machine from light bulbs to toasters to CT scanners and everything in between. Robotics, surgery. You're going to have a doctor in one country potentially running a robot doing surgery to a patient across the internet in another country at some point. Maybe it's a few years out from being mainstream, but the capability is there today. So worldwide. And I'm going to give this to you. It's a little hard to read, but it's an IDC infographic that has some nice stats that you might want to use. And I'll give you a bigger one, but I'm going to keep it for the moment because I get too old to read something that small. But if you look at the number of devices, it's saying by 2020, so they're projecting 5 years forward. So 30 billion connected devices globally, 1 out of 5 of which will be in China. So when you start thinking about, where's Asia Pacific going to fit into, where's, APAC as a region going to fit in all of this, there's going to be more users between India and China than there will be in Europe and in the United States. So, some of these companies are American companies that are going to make this stuff, but they're exporting. Apple and Ford and all these guys and GE are going to be out everywhere. So between the mobile devices that we're carrying and all of these new devices they're creating, and then new services they're going to get made. So if I've got, again, I'll take the example because it's kind of fresh in my mind right now of the Apple Watch, but there will be other connected watches. They're not going to be the only one, other devices. So now what other services are going to come up and what kind of data is going to get made? Will I have my healthcare information in my watch? If I'm unconscious and the ambulance comes to get me, will they scan my watch and know who I am, what my doctor is, what drugs I take, what hospital to take me to? That's going to make me as a consumer maybe want to buy that product more. Maybe an insurance company is going to say, I'll give you a discount on your premium if you wear the watch and let me see how much you walk every day, or let me monitor your pulse, or some other invasive thing, which is scary to me. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I advocate this. I'm saying this is where I see the market going. There will be financial incentives. Your car insurance company may say the same thing. They may say, "Oh, we'd like to see how fast you drive. We want to see where you go, and we'll give you some reward for letting us have that information in terms of a financial incentive."
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I do see the Internet of Things becoming very, very big.
And but don't you think that this is something that will be happening first in the West, and then Asia will see it a little later?
It's happening here already. I mean, we've already got this Singapore Smart City initiative that's early. Mm-hmm. So like Asian countries that have adopted or in the process now, the early adopters are governments for sure. South Korea is a big one.
Yes.
Singapore is a big one. Australia is a big one. A couple of notes.
Australia, really? Which city in Australia?
I don't know about it being a city. I'm saying in terms of economies that are investing in this.
Technology not
necessarily that they're making a smart city. So the ones that are early adopters, Japan, Singapore, China, and Australia and Korea. And then the ones that are coming right behind it but will be the second wave are Malaysia, Thailand, India, and Indonesia. This was based on Frost and Sullivan data that I did some...
And in which sectors do you think these things are coming? Is it manufacturing, government?
So for this side of the world, manufacturing. Without a doubt. This is a big manufacturing sector. Government, I think, will be later. I think it'll be manufacturing and wearable tech. Not only the watches, but the Fitbits and the other various pieces like that. So the consumer has to come back and show the industry that there's an interest. But the consumers that have been polled are already showing that by 2020 that more than 2/3 of consumers around the world plan to buy a smart device, and more than half plan to buy some wearable tech based on the stats that I've been looked at. So consumers being polled are saying, yeah, we're interested in this. You know, we're keen to move forward with it. I don't think they understand exactly what it is that they're signing up for. I think there's going to be some serious speed bumps. But
it all look like so shiny and interesting, brilliant gizmo. But,
right. It all looks really neat, and it is really neat. Now the question for CIOs and for people running data centers is, well, how does this change my life? Because I've been doing this IT operations for a long time now. I started in 1989, so I really grew up with the industry. And the old-fashioned way of thinking was get everything that's important in the data center and then build a really firm perimeter around the data center with lots of different kinds of firewalls, maybe even multiple moats inside of the network. Make sure that you have one-way firewalls so that certain databases can only talk a certain way, et cetera. All that's great when everything's inside of the data center. But now you got hybrid clouds coming into you've got data sets that are so big that if I'm a company and you're a company and I want to share my data with you, it used to be like when I was in my 20s, my boss would say, we're doing some partnership with IBM, send them a tape of the database. And I would go tape and stick it in a US mail and send off a tape to somebody. Now you got petabytes of data. There's no practical way that I can move it in time, and you would have to buy so much disk to be able to accommodate my data. It's not practical, which means I need to share my data with you. I need to give you a way in to either my cloud or my network. And I've got to do it in a way that lets me as a CIO or a CTO know that I have not compromised other data that you don't have the right to see or that might be confidential data. So this is going to become a service. I'm going to have to come up as a CIO and say, now I've got to be more clever. I have to create an API for you, a web service of some sort, where I can control and authenticate every connection that you do and be able to relegate you to certain kinds of data. And I have to transform that data into a format that's acceptable for you, because maybe Fanny is also a partner, but she needs the data in a different way. But it's the same data, and vice versa. We've got to be able to go back and forth. So now the challenge that happens from the big data out to the Internet of Things is the things are all from different companies, and they're going to create the data in a different way, and they're going to deliver the data to me in a certain way. I need to analyze that data in real time. Maybe the consumer at the other end wants an answer like that. So I don't have time to bring it in and put it somewhere and do something to it and take it back. I might have to make a decision right then and there to return something. And now I've got to take all of that data, what came in and what I did with it, and bring it into my secure area and then I'm going to have to go share it again. So there's multiple areas now where for the CIO, security really has to become more about methodology, what I do with the data in terms of encryption and in terms of connection and in terms of audit when it's moving around, so that I know that what I send out will be a certain way and that what I take in will be safe and is not going to compromise me in some other fashion. This is very complicated. This is the hard part. This is how you make sure somebody's front door doesn't get hacked, right? Your smart front door that you open with your watch, some smart hacker might figure out what codes, Bluetooth codes, will open up that door, right? And maybe it's something you never tested for. Or maybe you did test for it and it worked great, but then some new app like Tinder came out that everybody bought, and the hackers figured out how to get Tinder to talk to another app that will open up your front door, right? Yes. That's the hard part. How do you do that?
Yeah. Even I think Apple Pay is facing this kind of problem, right?
Right.
And banks are either not talking about it, but this is happening.
Right.
Right.
So Apple Pay, I don't know much about how it works on the back end, and I'm not qualified to talk about it in particular, but products like Apple Pay, you're putting a tremendous amount of trust in by putting your credit cards.
Right.
And I think, speaking not for Commvault, but as a security professional myself, I think what they've done is pretty clever, because it is extremely difficult to really they've encrypted and moved things around into other areas. So even if you get into one piece of the good stuff, you don't have enough to actually get the data out, right? But what if some other app can very cleverly fool Apple Pay into thinking everything's happened and pull it out? Now, in the Apple ecosystem, there's a lot of testing that happens with things that come into the Apple Store. It takes a long time to get approved because what we think they're doing, of course, is testing all of that on the back end. Is the Android ecosystem as safe?
No, Android is worse probably.
Right. I mean, my guess is as well, right? So what happens when, as I said before, the Internet of Things, the actual devices get separated from the software? So now it's even possible that you might have an Android device, I'm just speaking theoretically, that might be able to take advantage of an Apple device, or take advantage of an Apple device via a third device they both connect to. This is where all of this gets real murky for us, and nobody knows yet because it's new. The next 5 years, we'll have all of this adoption, and we'll also have all of these interesting problems that nobody could possibly have foreseen, because hackers are very, very clever, creative people.
Right.
Right.
So you just mentioned about security as a methodology, right? Or some method.
Right.
CIOs will have to think of a method.
They're going to really have to think about
So what
security.
is that method that your company is sort of recommending?
Well, so we're not a security company, we're a data management company. But one of the first things that happens if you do get compromised, or if you do have a service that goes away, is you've got to first identify what happened, and you've got to secondly get that service back as quickly as possible. And then thirdly, you need to work with your PR people and figure out how you're going to, if it's required, how you're going to tell the public what happened. Because the longer these things fester, the worse it becomes for you when they finally find out. And people are angry at Sony because there were months and months and months that data was being stolen, and they didn't say anything. If they'd come out and said, we've had a breach, we have a problem, then people at least could have said, okay, I need to start checking and make sure that someone didn't open up a credit card in my name or buy it, or make sure that my phone doesn't have 1 million minutes on it or whatever. So from Commvault's point of view, we're really into the classification of our customers' data. So we're able to help customers understand what kind of data they have and where that data is located. And that's important because data is everywhere now. Data is in multiple clouds, multiple disks in multiple data centers. Where are there copies of data? Where has data changed? Where was there a delta between today and yesterday? So here's where we can help with like an intrusion detection system or a host-based intrusion detection system, network-based, where they can say, well, we think we've had a breach. We aren't sure. Hey, Commvault, what's changed in this set of data that belongs to this business service? And now I can go in and look at that data and say, oh, the checksums are all the same, nothing's changed. Or, oh, interesting, all the byte sizes are the same, but some of the checksums are different. Well, now I know exactly where to look. I can identify that data. I can roll back with Commvault and put the old data back in, so I can say, okay, as of 4 hours ago we were good. Let's go back to where we were, and I can do that using snapshots. I can leverage snapshots on everybody's hardware, get it up and running again. Commvault also lets you take physical and virtual machines. Well, we'll talk about virtual machines because that's really kind of where the world's going. Yeah, sure. If I have a virtual machine running on my data center, I can put a virtual machine up in a cloud, like a Microsoft cloud, And Commvault can make sure that the one in the cloud is in sync with the one in the terrestrial data center. So I could say, oh, this one's been compromised, but that one's still good. Point all my DNS servers to the one up in the cloud, and the company can keep going. So we give the ability.
Even though it is in sync, it'll not get corrupted?
You can do the sync within as little as 15 minutes or as much as several hours. So this can be a strategy, and this is what the CIO and the CISO, the information security officers, have to decide is what's our plan for a 4-hour business resumption or a 24-hour disaster recovery plan, right? And so by classifying the data with Commvault and mapping the data to specific business functions, you can decide, okay, this is mission critical, this can't be down for more than an hour, this set of data, this 5 terabytes of data, and here's what our plan is, and not waste time and money on the rest of it that you don't actually need. Well, what we find is that most IT organizations don't know what they've got. You inherit data over the years. You know, a company buys another company, the employees leave.
Right.
There's a NAS with 50 terabytes of data. Everyone's afraid that if they erase it, they're going to be the bad guy and get fired. So it sits, and the data's there, and it might be getting used, and it might not be, and they don't know. And they're spending money on hardware that maybe they don't even need to be. So we come in and we say, hey, we're going to classify all the data, and we're going to show you what hasn't been touched in a year, what hasn't been touched in 6 months, what's been looked at but not modified for a certain period of time. We give them all this metadata, and we say, okay, now I handed you all this information about your data, but what good is that? Commvault will take that information and turn it into rules. We'll say, okay, now that you know about your data, come back and give me some rules. Well, anything that hasn't been touched in more than 9 months should go off to tape, or should go up to the cloud, or to an iSCSI disk, and Commvault will pick it up and move it for you. And we'll start managing where the data is located, and it will know what's there, we'll know what's changed. So that's the value that we bring as far as security in the Internet of Things is, I can't tell you if an app got naughty with another app and stole some data, but once you've identified that there's an issue, I can help you remediate it and understand it and decide what you want to do from a technical standpoint, and then you'll figure out from a PR standpoint. Hey, here are the 8,000 customers that were affected. We're really sorry. Here's what we're going to do to make it up to you. The rest of you, we can assure you it's okay because Commvault gave us the information that we need. So that's a big piece of where we fit in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in this regard, like data management, what are your customers in Singapore, other parts of Asia worried about? What is their current worry?
I think that they aren't necessarily worried so much about the Internet of Things yet.
Yes.
I think that their current worries are around things like disaster recovery. That's a huge one because unfortunately we do have a situation with climate change. Tides are rising. We have issues with floods. We've seen some things in the Philippines and in Thailand.
Right.
They end up taking out factories, and it ends up really affecting the supply chain for the entire world. So they want to understand how they can bring their business services up as quickly as they can. A lot of them are interested in the cloud. They've been a little wary of it, but I'd say in the last year it's starting to really pick up because it's just becoming so inexpensive to store that they really can't kind of avoid it. So they want to talk to us about security. They want to know, can I put it up there and really know that there's no way anybody can get to that data, or that I can somehow comply with a bank or government regulation. Commvault holds FIPS certification for our data encryption. So the U.S. government and military uses Commvault because they're absolutely sure that that data is secure. And we're the only backup vendor that has a FIPS certificate. So that's a big comfort to them. I'd say the other area that I'm hearing a lot about is edge protection. They're saying, well, you got a lot of people like myself that walk around with a laptop, an iPad, a couple of iPhones. I've got company data sitting on all those devices. Not really the Internet of Things, but similar problem. The data that belongs to the organization is now in the data center and on 4 or 5 devices that don't belong to the company. Right? They can't control what I do with them. They can't control if it gets stolen, which has happened to me before. Things happen, right? Suddenly someone's walking around with your phone. Okay, well, that's a bit of a bummer, but what information was he able to get to in the phone, and what do I know? So Commvault's got ways for us to find devices like laptops that might have been stolen. We've got a little beacon that calls home. When the laptop calls in again, it will brick the laptop so no one can get into it, and it will report where it found the laptop. And we'll know exactly what data was on it because our agent, as soon as it wakes up, it sees what changed from the last backup, and it will say, these are the files that potentially changed since that last time. Here's what was on. Here's what was accessed, because we can look at file access times and file access dates. So we can give them a lot more control over what the data is and sharing. Things like Dropbox technology. Dropbox is a really cool app. There's a lot of cool apps that do various kind of sharing. But how do you deal with understanding who saw it and what they did to it? And how do you know, and I'm not talking about Dropbox in particular, but how do you know that any vendor that gives you a free service is not looking at your data? And do you want them doing that? So we provide places within a company's cloud or data center to be able to let employees share large files with one another, or to be able to let groups do collaboration work where, who's got the current version of the file? Are we all going to try to write over each other when we get back in, so we've got all the different revisions in it? So we're trying to give customers the opportunity to do a lot more than just back the data up. We want to let them use the data intelligently in a number of different ways. I would say that DR and Edge and virtualization are the three things that my customers in this region want to talk about the most. Yeah.
DR, virtualization, and cloud.
And the Edge stuff. Yeah.
What is the Edge? Sorry.
Edge is any devices on the edge of the data center. So these are the laptops and the tablets.
Multiple devices that people
right.
carry. Yeah.
They're interested in cloud. They're interested in DR. They're interested in edge devices, and they're interested in virtualization. Everybody's trying to virtualize as much as they can for obvious reasons, right? There's a big cost savings piece to it. But virtual machines bring a lot of difficulty. It's very easy to make. Anybody can make a new virtual machine. So you're going to go from, dev to test to dev to test to dev to test, and finally it'll get blessed and become golden and go over the wall and go into production. And then they move on. And they created 20 virtual machines that are all spinning and taking up CPU and taking up disk and aren't being used anymore. So we're doing virtual machine lifecycle management. We basically say to them, hey, virtual machine's 90 days old, hasn't been turned on, or it's been turned on but nobody's logged into it. Take a look at this. And should we archive this machine? And should this machine then go on to have a final death? Full life cycle. If I haven't turned the machine on in 90 days, it goes to archive. If no one pulls it out of archive in 120 days, it's dead. Let's get rid of it. We're not taking up space. So they want to do that. They want to create golden copy of a virtual machine that they use over and over and over again, so they don't have to worry about rogue people taking too many resources. They want to know if somebody has broken that rule and have an alert go off so they can look into it and say, oh, is this necessary, or is this something that you just did because you don't know what you're doing, or whatever. So, and then they want to synchronize those virtual machines. As I had mentioned, they say, well, I want to put one in the cloud as well. And want to be able to make it so if one machine goes down, the other can pick up. The other thing that we get a lot of conversations about is they say, oh, I've got this 10-year-old Windows 2000 machine that's still running something business critical, and I can't buy the hardware to replace it, and I can't upgrade it because the guy who wrote it doesn't work here anymore, but our whole company runs on it, and I'm scared. And they say, can you back it up? And I say, well, we can do something better than back it up. We can run something that we call Virtualize Me, which allows us to turn a physical machine, Windows or Unix, into a virtual machine. And now, suddenly you don't have to worry about the hardware anymore because you've got a virtual version, and you don't have to worry about the software anymore because it's working, so you just don't patch it or mess with it anymore. So we're giving companies opportunities to take some of these problematic old legacy machines and turn them into a more modern platform. Yeah. So data is, the backing up part is what we're really well known for. That's actually the most boring part of our story. We have a lot of other things that we're doing. Right. And that's why I'm excited about Internet of Things, because,
sorry.
That's, no worries, mate.
The real machine, what happens to the real machine? So you virtualize the whole machine.
Yeah.
So what happens to the real machine? It can just die?
Yeah, the real machine can die at the point that it's become a virtual machine. And this is something that we do in concert with like VMware. So VMware is actually the hypervisor. We're not a hypervisor. But we're the thing that works with VMware to take that machine and turn it into a proper virtual machine. Once that's up and running, you don't need the physical machine anymore, which is good because some of these machines are really, really old machines that, disks all die eventually, right? They all stop spinning. You're just trying to, to get there. And at that point, I would just run it virtually, on a modern, fast blade computer, even a virtual machine is going to be faster than a 15-year-old server. I don't care how good it was 15 years ago. Moore's Law, just, blow way past it. So I used to work for a phone company in Nevada. I'm from the United States, and this was many years ago. But we had just this kind of problem. We had a very, very old computer that had a really old home-written program, and nobody knew what to do with it, and we lived in terror of that computer falling apart because we knew that we didn't have a solution. We begged our management. We said, "This thing, if it dies, we cannot do anything for you, and it will take the company down." And by the grace of God, it just didn't break, and they finally did it. But it took 3 or 4 years from the time we identified the problem till the time that they did it. And in this world now, that's just unconscionable. The amount of damage something like that does could take a company down. If you're down for 20 days, you're done. And you're not going to find a circa 1997 compact computer in 2015 in under 20 days and get it all working. It's just not realistic. So, yeah.
So basically, interestingly, so your business is basically sitting between the real physical infrastructure and the clouds.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So you're basically the connection, right?
Yeah, so what we look at ourselves as is a giant virtual data store. We look at local disks, SANs, NASs, tapes, and clouds, both public and private clouds. To us, they're just magnetic libraries. It's all obscured.
Right.
So we're just moving from one library to another library. And as long as the user is understanding that there are physical limitations to how fast disks spin and networks go, as long as you're not trying to do something faster than it can be done, it's not a problem. With the data classification, we help them understand what the data sets are that are most important and that they need to invest in the really fast hardware, right? So, but to not waste it and buy hundreds of terabytes of super fast disk when there's really 15 terabytes that are mission critical. Answering that question is really difficult for most customers. They don't understand, or the data is so intermingled that they can't separate it out. So that's a big piece of value.
Right. And I just wanted to know whether once you virtualize the data, is it going to be there forever, or is there also a possibility of loss?
Once you virtualize the data, so a virtual machine at the end of the day is just a giant disk, right, with an engine sitting under it. There's always a possibility of losing data.
So how would you manage that?
That's given. So you're keeping multiple generations of that data in multiple places, and that's how you get around that problem. So most of our customers store data on disks, and most of those disks are NAS or SANs made from companies like IBM or or like NetApp or Hitachi Data Systems. These have multiple fail-safes built into them. They can have 2 or 3 or 4 physical disks in a shelf die and still run okay. And statistically, the chance of having more than 2 or 3 disks die within a 24-hour period, unless the building was on fire or something, it's so statistically out there that you don't really have to worry about it. The chances of it happening are infinitesimal. So by keeping the data on the high quality disks, you have the safety of the hardware error checking, making sure that you're not going to have corruption or you're not going to have data loss. By keeping multiple generations in archive, you save yourself from somebody accidentally going in and erasing all of that data. Well, okay, maybe we lost yesterday's data, but I've got several years worth of data sitting on tape or in the cloud or some other place. I can bring it back in. It's not a total disaster. And then in terms of the really unthinkable stuff, the building blows up, there's a flood, etc., most customers have a disaster recovery data center. Maybe it's a physical data center in another location, maybe it's in the cloud, maybe it's a combination of the two, but we get the data, there's always a copy of the data other than what's primary that they can lean back on. So that's how all of the big guys do it. Yeah.
And in terms of your perspective in Asia, what is the percentage of companies which have sort of already gone for virtualization?
I mean, this just from my perspective, I don't have a number to back this up. I would say that well into 90% of the companies in Asia are using virtualization. Now, they may not have gotten all the way there. There's a lot of data center transformation type of projects going on. But VMware in particular, which is far and away the market leader, it's been around for over 10 years. And a lot of people at least are running a fraction of their data center in virtual machines. I would say, my personal opinion, most data centers are at least 30 to 40% virtual. New machines being created with all of my enterprise customers are virtual machines. They're using Hyper-V, they're using VMware, and they're using Citrix. and there's a few of them using like Oracle's got a one, and it's a couple of open source ones, but those three are the big three. VMware far and away the biggest of all of them. Yeah.
Okay. And tying it back to IoT, I mean, basically what you're saying is IoT will generate a lot of data, right?
Oh, a ton.
And then you need to manage all that data.
That's correct.
So basically that's where your role will come in.
Yeah.
Companies like Vault.
That's exactly right. It's going to create a ton of data. I mean, this infographic, really kind of talks about that on maybe the next page. It's going to be right now. They're saying, Fanny, I'm looking for the statistic for the total amount.
Data?
I think they're saying by 2020 it'll be 57. Yeah, here it is.
What, billion, trillion?
Yeah, 57.96 billion
Yeah.
dollars.
So Gartner says that right now.
That's your market.
No, this is number of connected things. So
okay, yeah.
Gartner says that as of 2013, Gartner says that number of connected items will be 25 billion connected items by the year 2020, and overall Internet of Things adoption in APAC would be $57.96 billion by 2020. All right. So, yeah. And I can get you, Fanny can get you any of these Gartner or IDC numbers after the fact if we don't have them handy.
Yeah, I might have the APAC ones, but sorry, IDC ones. I don't have the Gartner one. Might not have seen it. The APAC one just came in, right? The IDC APAC figures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it just came in. Okay.
Yeah. So IDC says by 2020, by the year 2020, globally, across the world, there should be 29.5 billion devices, wireless devices collected globally. So right now, I think there's, a much smaller amount. I think it's
5 billion or something?
Yeah, around 5 billion.
Yeah.
So it's going to grow. Internet of Things market, IDC worldwide Internet of Things market will grow from 1.9 trillion devices in 2013 to 7.1 trillion devices in 2020. So you can see it's triple to quadruple growth in the next 5 years. That's going to be all of these wearable devices that people are buying. It's going to be all these little things that we attach to our cars and a myriad of other things. Everybody wants a smart house. They want a smart thermostat. They want smart lights. They want an entertainment center. Right. They want all this stuff. But then, there's other interesting stuff. What about the nanny cam? What about watching the kids, seeing the home, seeing who's walking around outside the home? Here in Singapore, that's not maybe so much of a deal. It's a pretty secure country. But in my country, the United States, oh, man, they really want that stuff.
Of course, even here, I think some people will go for that.
For the nanny stuff, they probably would,
stuff,
right?
Yeah.
See what the maid's doing or what the nanny's doing. Yeah. They're not so worried about home security, but they're definitely worried about what's happening when they're not home. Yeah.
Fantastic.
What are the kids up to? Yeah. So that was a lot of information. Did I get you everywhere you needed to go, or do you have some lingering questions about us?
Basically, it's a big picture view. IoT and data management was the relationship, basically, and what you guys do.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we're really interested in what happens after the collection of the data by whatever those devices are. It all has to come back to some place and have something done to it. If they're collecting my how far I walked today or how many times my heart beat in an hour, I need to do something with that. It needs to become a report that goes somewhere. And it's taking data from me and my device in my pocket, and it's going to go to all these different places, and each one of them might be holding a little fraction of that data. It's kind of good because then if I'm a hacker and I attack one guy, all I'm getting are like little pieces of stuff. May not make any sense, maybe, but once you can fake out an application and make it think that you are legitimate where you belong, and you can walk through and bounce through all these different data sets, that's scary, scary stuff. Yeah.
And that is happening, I think, already.
It is already happening. I mean, there's no question about it. It's happening in retail. It's happening with credit cards. Apple Pay may actually end up being a more secure option than I think it is. Because right now you use your credit card at a retailer. They store your name and the credit card, all the information, the little secret code, the expiration date. That's all in their computer. If you can break into their computer and steal it and sell it on the black market, you make a lot of money, and that's what they've been doing. With what Apple is doing with the Apple Wallet is they don't actually hold any of the card information all by itself in the wallet. It's in different pieces and it's encrypted a different way. So there isn't one place to go to get all the data. You can't go to Apple and get everybody's Apple Wallet data. They don't have it. It's encrypted in your phone, and the phone has to be able to talk to Apple to unencrypt it at the point of sale for the purpose of the sale, and they don't actually give the credit card data to the vendor. They give a code to the vendor. So nobody ever owns the credit card information in clear text. It's always hidden away and only being accessed. That's the right way to do it, in my opinion. Right? That's the right way to do it. But do you know? Who do you want to trust with all of your stuff? Do you want to trust Apple, Facebook, IBM, Microsoft? I mean, at some point, everybody's going to have to pick who their partner is going to be. And these companies, you look at Apple as an investor, and I'm just an amateur investor. I'm not speaking with any authority on this. And you say, well, how much are they going to sell next year? Are people still going to want to buy an iPhone 7? Or are they going to buy another iPad? Or are they going to buy a watch? And it almost doesn't matter, because once you're in the ecosystem, every few years you are going to upgrade. The thing is, are you going to end up getting into Apple and having them run your car and run your banking and run their healthcare app? And once you're in their ecosystem, you're never going to get out. You get locked in, right? And that's the real value. That's what's going to make them the biggest company in the world for the next 20 years. Because once you're in there, once you're in Facebook, how do you get out of Facebook? Right. So that's the genius of these guys. Yeah. That's the thing that CIOs have to understand: services versus products. It's all about services. Yes. Even Commvault, we're working with MSPs now to sell Commvault as a service to service providers that want to resell a backup service or a DR service. So
it comes together as a package.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it doesn't make sense to make them buy our software in the old-fashioned way. Yeah, because they look and go, well, I don't know if I'm going to have enough customers to handle this amount. Right. And they come to us and say, how do we price it? How much should we charge? What does it really cost us? Because we have to buy hardware and disks, and we have to buy network and computers and Commvault software. So we work with these companies and say, what service do you want to sell? Let's back into what it will cost, and we'll put the whole thing together and give you a service catalog and show you how much margin you can make on it. So it's transforming our business as well. We're not a traditional software company anymore, and I'm having to learn a new way of selling as well, because we're all figuring it out as we go.
Yes. Mostly through partners or channels, or
we're doing a lot of that, but they're asking us too, because look, as a whole industry, we're all in the same boat.
For them also is important. It's not just their one product, right? One service.
Right.
Yeah. So they have like a bunch of stuff, and then they can solve most of the problems.
And they're all trying to figure out how to maximize their profit. What's the right price point for these things? How do you make the right margin on it so that you can keep growing your business and doing new things? And the early cloud stuff, like you look at Amazon and Microsoft, everyone is selling storage in the cloud. They've dropped the price to the point that no one's making any money on it. It's pennies per gigabyte now. Microsoft gives me unlimited OneDrive with my Microsoft Office subscription. I can put as many terabytes up there as I want. I'm never going to buy a disk again. Microsoft will give me all the disk I could ever possibly want. So there's no value in that. They devalued as an industry. They devalued storage. And you talk about who gets hurt by the Internet of Things or who gets hurt by these changes. Disk drive manufacturers. No one's going to Funan and buying 3 terabyte drives anymore. They're sticking it all up in the cloud. That whole business is going to shrink and become a little piece of itself. But a new business has been created. All the big drive vendors, now they're doing 8 and 10 and 12 terabyte disks to stick in these giant trays for the cloud providers to be able to give you more disk. So one dies and another picks up again. It's happening lightning fast. It's frightening to watch. So we're all trying to keep up with
How about the main storage companies? They'll be in business?
The main storage companies will stay in business, but they're going to change a lot of their stuff. So you've got people like Seagate, for instance. I'll just choose as a random hypothetical. They make disk drives. They're going to start making less consumer-based disk drives because there isn't demand for them anymore. They're going to have to figure out how to make higher density disks, faster higher density disks that then they would sell to IBM, who will put them into shelving and into giant, iron boxes and sell them to the cloud company. Right. But then even before Seagate, there's people who make all the little parts that go into those disks. And so they have to create parts that Seagate can use to make the So this is how it's transforming the business.
But companies like NetApp and others would exist because they are needed in data centers, right?
They will exist, but the parts they put in will change. So they go to Seagate and they go to Hitachi and other companies and buy the disks that go into a NetApp, right? NetApp doesn't make disks, CMC doesn't make disks. They make the trays and they make all the logic that goes behind it.
Right.
So their customers are saying, hey, I got to pack more into the same amount of real estate.
Right.
And they go back to the drive manufacturers and say, we need you to pack more in a drive our customers want, right? And they go back to their supply chain. So it trickles all the way down to whoever that guy is that sits there with a microscope and figures out how to squeeze more bits onto the platter.
Space, eh?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. That was fun. I hope it was useful to you. I talk a lot.
Certainly, no. Always learn new things. Learn some.
Sandy, these are all for him, yeah?
Yeah, we can share the soft copy
Please.
with you if it's easier.
Yeah, he doesn't need these, but
if you can send me the soft copy.
And
yeah, okay,
we
that's
can
fine.
also share the link to the IDC infographic.
Yeah, send them the link, but here's a bigger one if your eyes are as bad as mine. Mine are horrible. Oh, this goes with it.
Charles Anderson, I was just talking to him this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, they're interesting guys.
Yeah, I think he did a presentation at the IoT Asia event.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't see us at an IoT event right now.
Of course, I understand that.
Again, that's more of the data up front, but I could see it happening.
But yeah, I can see the connection now, more clearly.
Yeah, or one of our partners. That's the other end of it. We're trying to enable Singtel and people like that to be able to sell that service on our behalf. Because
Singtel is becoming a security company, right?
Yeah, all of the telcos have to get into that business because of what I described before. They're all feeling that same pain, And
OTT,
from a standpoint of a CIO, you really want to go to a one-stop shop as much as you can. So if you can trust your service provider to be your security provider, that's pretty cool.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.